There are moments in life when everything you thought was solid begins to crumble beneath your feet. Plans, routines, the sense of certainty you held onto like a lifeline. Suddenly, all of it collapses like a fragile house of cards. For him, it began not with a single catastrophe, but with a slow unraveling. The job that once felt secure vanished overnight. The relationship he believed would last forever dissolved into silence. And as if the world had conspired, his health faltered too, leaving him weaker, both in body and in spirit. He didn't speak much about it. Outwardly, he wore the mask of someone still holding on. But inside, there was a storm he could no longer control. The mornings were the worst. Opening his eyes, he would feel the weight of another day pressing against his chest, a heaviness that seemed unbearable. People around him gave the usual advice. Stay positive, this too shall pass. But words felt hollow when survival itself seemed like an uphill climb. It wasn't just the external losses that hurt him, it was the loss of himself. He had once been strong, confident, even proud of his resilience. Now every reflection in the mirror seemed to show a stranger, someone defeated, someone unsure if he had the strength to keep moving. The thought terrified him more than the unpaid bills, more than the empty phone calls. What frightened him was the possibility that he had lost the fight inside. On one of those sleepless nights, as rain tapped softly on the window, he reached for an old book gathering dust on the shelf. He didn't know why. Perhaps it was desperation, perhaps it was instinct. Inside, he stumbled upon words that struck like lightning in the darkness. You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this and you will find strength. Marcus Aurelius, the Roman emperor who faced plagues, wars, betrayal, and yet still believed that the fortress of the mind was unshakable. Something stirred within him, not hope, at least not yet, but curiosity. Was it possible that while his world had fallen apart, there was still one thing left untouched? Could it be that the true collapse wasn't outside, but inside, where fear and despair had been allowed to grow unchecked? That night, he didn't find all the answers, but he found something more important, a question. What if the problem wasn't the fall itself, but his fear of rising again? And this, dear listener, is where his story begins. If you've ever felt that everything around you was crumbling, if you've ever wondered whether you'd have the strength to rise again, then stay with us. Subscribe now, not just to hear a story, but to walk with us through lessons that can change how you see your darkest days. Because sometimes, what looks like the end is only the beginning of a new kind of strength. The days that followed were not marked by sudden victories or grand transformations. They were marked by silence. The kind of silence that creeps in when the world seems to move on without you, when friends stop calling, when opportunities no longer knock, and when even the smallest routines feel like carrying stones uphill. For him, silence was heavier than noise. It whispered doubts into every corner of his mind. You're not enough. You failed. There's no point in trying again. These thoughts arrived uninvited, but they stayed like unwelcome guests, feeding on his energy until even standing up felt like a monumental act. He didn't tell anyone. Pride kept his mouth shut, and fear chained his feet to the ground. Outwardly, he wore the same smile, nodded at the same conversations, and pretended everything was fine. But inside, every breath was a quiet war between despair and the faint spark that refused to die. It was during one of those endless mornings, staring blankly at the ceiling, that the thought returned. What if the problem isn't the fall itself, but the fear of rising again? That question gnawed at him. Could it be that suffering wasn't meant to destroy him, but to shape him into someone new? The Stoics often wrote about hardship not as punishment, but as training. Seneca once said, "Fire tests gold, misfortune tests brave men." These words echoed in his mind, almost mocking him at first, but then something shifted. What if this pain wasn't proof of weakness, but an invitation to grow stronger? What if the silence he feared so much was actually space to rebuild, piece by piece, from the ground up? That day he didn't leap out of bed with newfound strength. He didn't suddenly conquer his fears. Instead, he did something small, almost invisible. He got up. He made his bed. It seemed trivial, almost laughable. But in that moment, it wasn't about the bed. It was about reclaiming one corner of his world from the chaos. And that is how change often begins. Not with fireworks, but with a spark. A single choice, repeated over and over, becomes the foundation of a life rebuilt. He didn't know it yet, but this tiny act of defiance was the first step toward a strength deeper than he had ever known. If you're listening, and you feel the weight of silence pressing on you, remember, you don't have to climb the mountain today. Just take the smallest step you can. And before we go further, I invite you to subscribe to this channel. Not because it will erase your pain, but because here, together, we explore how to transform it into purpose. For a long time, he believed his enemies were outside. The job that had vanished, the people who had left, the financial weight pressing him down. But the more he sat with his thoughts, the more he realized the real battle wasn't with the world. It was within himself. The Stoics were clear on this truth. Epictetus, born a slave, crippled and yet unbroken, once said, "People are disturbed not by things, but by the views which they take of them." It wasn't the loss itself that chained him to despair. It was his belief that the loss defined him, that he had no strength left, that his story had already ended. Changing that belief felt impossible. The voice in his head was loud, cruel, relentless. It mocked every effort. But here's what he began to understand. He didn't need to silence the voice all at once. He only needed to question it. Is it true? Am I really finished? Or is that just fear pretending to be truth? Each time he asked, the grip of despair loosened. Not much, but enough to breathe, enough to act. And every small act became a vote for life. Making the bed, stepping outside for fresh air, drinking water instead of another cup of despair. These weren't victories the world would cheer for, but they were victories nonetheless. The Stoics called this self-mastery, the slow, deliberate reclaiming of the only kingdom no one can conquer but you, the kingdom of your own mind. And once he realized that, he no longer saw the silence as an enemy. He began to see it as training. A harsh teacher, yes, but a teacher that would not leave until the lesson was learned. If you are listening right now and the loudest enemy in your life is your own thoughts, remember this. Your mind can be both your prison and your liberation. The same walls that seem to close you in can also protect you once you reshape them. The battle begins inside, but so does the victory. Nights were the hardest. When the world grew quiet, his thoughts grew louder. The silence wasn't peace, it was pressure, the kind that pressed on his chest until breathing felt like work. He wondered how long a person could carry invisible weight before breaking. But then in that silence he stumbled across words that felt like a hand reaching through time. Marcus Aurelius had written, "You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength." At first he resisted. How could a sentence compete with the storm inside him? Yet the more he repeated it, the more it settled into him, not as a miracle, but as a seed. The silence was no longer just emptiness. It became the soil where this seed could grow. He realized that silence could destroy him or strengthen him depending on how he used it. He could fill it with fear, with what-ifs and regrets, or he could fill it with reflection, with choosing the next small action, with reminding himself that even in the chaos of life, his response was still his. So he began to change his relationship with silence. Instead of running from it with distractions, he leaned into it. He journaled. He asked questions he had been avoiding. What do I still have? What can I still control? What kind of man do I want to become through this? And little by little, the silence shifted. It no longer only reminded him of what he had lost. It began to show him what he could build. If you are in that kind of silence now, know this. It is not the end. It can be the place where your strength begins. The next morning, nothing had magically changed. The bills still sat on the table, the weight still pressed on his chest, and the world still felt indifferent to his struggle. But this time, he did something different. He made his bed. It sounds laughably small, almost meaningless. But in that simple act, he discovered something powerful. For the first time in weeks, he had chosen order over chaos. The Stoics taught that while we cannot command the storms of life, we can command ourselves. And in that moment, the bed became his empire and he its ruler. Later, when the heaviness crept back in, he reached for another Stoic principle. Focus only on what is within your control. He couldn't erase his debts with a thought. He couldn't undo the loss of what had already slipped through his fingers. But he could make a call. He could write a plan. He could step outside and breathe. These tiny actions seemed insignificant compared to the scale of his problems. Yet they were the very bricks from which resilience was built. Each small victory whispered, "You are not powerless. You are not defeated. You are still here. And slowly, day after day, those whispers became a steady voice inside him, not of arrogance, but of quiet strength, the kind of strength that doesn't shout but endures. The Stoics called this self-mastery. He began to see that the real test was not whether life would give him comfort again, but whether he could hold his ground when comfort was gone. If you are listening right now and wondering if the little things matter, remember this. Resilience is not built in grand gestures. It is built in the smallest acts of defiance against despair. Every choice you make, no matter how small, is proof that you are still fighting. And that proof matters. He soon realized something that the Stoics had always known. The first and greatest battle of life is not with the world, but with yourself. The doubts, the fears, the voices whispering you can't, those were his fiercest enemies. The world could take his money, his stability, his plans, but only he could decide if it would take his will. And that was the real arena, his own mind. Every time he chose to act, even in the smallest way, he was proving to himself that he was stronger than the fear that tried to paralyze him. The enemy wasn't the letter from the debt collector or the rejection from a job application. The enemy was the thought that said, "It's hopeless. Why bother trying?" So he began treating his thoughts the way a Stoic would, not as unquestionable truths, but as visitors at the door. Some he allowed in, others he let pass. When despair knocked, he learned to pause and ask, "Is this thought helping me or harming me? Does it serve the life I want to build, or does it steal my strength?" Slowly, he learned the art of choosing his thoughts the way a warrior chooses his weapons. Not all emotions could be silenced, nor should they be, but they could be guided. Anger became determination. Sadness became compassion. Fear became awareness. This was not the easy road. Some days he lost the battle and the old despair returned. But even then he discovered another Stoic truth. Failure is not falling, but staying down. Each time he rose again, he was training the most important muscle of all, resilience. And if you are listening to this facing your own doubts, your own inner war, remember this. You do not have to win every battle to win the war. You only need to keep standing, keep choosing, keep trying. The victory is not perfection. It is persistence. In time, he noticed something subtle but life-changing. The victories that mattered most were not the loud, visible ones, but the quiet, invisible ones. Waking up on a day he didn't want to face. That was a victory. Reaching out to a friend when pride told him to stay silent. Another victory. Choosing patience when frustration boiled inside him. Yet another. The world often celebrates only the big wins, promotions, wealth, recognition, but the Stoics taught a different kind of accounting. True wealth is measured in discipline, true strength in endurance, true success in the ability to rise again when you fall. Each small choice was like laying a stone on a path. Alone, a stone meant little, but over time, they built a road strong enough to carry him forward, and that road, unlike luck or chance, could not be taken away. One evening, as he reflected on his day, he realized he had begun to shift. He was no longer waiting for some grand rescue, some miracle to erase his pain. He was building his own rescue, one act at a time. And here is the truth the Stoics wanted us to remember. No matter how much life falls apart, there is always one thing left in your control: your response. That response, repeated day after day, becomes your character. And your character is the foundation of your destiny. So if you feel broken, if everything around you seems lost, don't underestimate the power of the small wins. They may not look heroic, but they are. Each one is proof that you are not defeated. Each one is a reminder that even when the world takes much, it can never take the will you choose to keep. There came a morning when he caught himself doing something he hadn't in a long time, humming while making coffee. It was so small that most would dismiss it, but to him it meant the heaviness was lifting. Not because life had become easier, but because he had become stronger. The Stoics never promised a life free of pain. What they promised was that if you practiced endurance, discipline, and clarity, you could carry pain without letting it crush you. And that's exactly what he was learning. He remembered Marcus Aurelius's words, "If it is not right, do not do it. If it is not true, do not say it." At first, those words had felt distant, the wisdom of an emperor far removed from his own broken kitchen. But now he began to see them not as lofty ideals, but as daily instructions. Even when the world is falling apart, you can still choose integrity. You can still choose honesty. You can still choose courage. Life hadn't stopped testing him. There were still setbacks, still nights when doubt came like a thief in the dark. But his response had changed. He no longer begged for the storm to pass, he learned to stand in the rain. And in standing, he discovered something remarkable. Storms lose their terror once you know you can survive them. And if you're listening to this, maybe you've been in that storm yourself. Maybe you still are. Remember this: strength is not found in the absence of hardship, but in the choice to keep walking through it. Every day you rise, even trembling, you are rewriting your story. As weeks turned into months, something unexpected began to happen. People noticed. They saw the quiet strength in the way he carried himself, the calm in his voice, the steadiness in his steps. Friends who had once been distant now asked him for advice. A colleague struggling with his own troubles pulled him aside one afternoon and said, "How are you managing all of this without falling apart?" He didn't give a speech. He didn't present a philosophy textbook. He simply told the truth. "I don't fight what I can't control. I focus on what I can do next. That's all." The answer was simple, but it landed with weight. Because what people truly need is not perfection or platitudes. They need proof. Proof that it's possible to endure. Proof that resilience is not a gift, but a practice. And that's what he had become without even realizing it. Living proof that you can be struck down and still rise again. Not unscarred, not untouched, but unbroken. This is where the Stoics offer us their greatest gift. When you begin to master your response to hardship, you don't just heal yourself, you light a path for others. Your example becomes a silent invitation saying, "If I can endure, so can you." He never set out to inspire anyone. He just wanted to survive. But by walking through the storm with integrity and courage, he became something greater. A lighthouse for others still lost in the dark. And maybe that's what your pain can become too. Not just a burden, not just a scar, but a beacon. Because when everything falls apart and you still find a way to rise, you prove that strength is possible. You prove that hope is real. It was a quiet afternoon when he realized that the storm no longer defined him. The world outside hadn't changed much. Bills still came, challenges still appeared without warning, and some wounds still ached when the night was too long. But inside, he was no longer the same man who once feared he could never stand again. What had changed was not fortune, but perspective. He had learned what the Stoics had always taught, that strength is not measured by how little we suffer, but by how deeply we endure. That when everything falls apart, you do not lose your life. You are handed the raw material to rebuild it stronger, wiser, and truer. And so he began to see his hardships not as accidents, but as training. Every fall had taught him balance. Every loss had taught him value. Every silence had taught him to listen more deeply. The pain had not left him untouched, but it had left him prepared. He looked back and understood. Falling apart had not destroyed him. It had introduced him to the unshakable foundation within. And standing again was not the end of his story. It was the beginning of a life lived with clarity, courage, and purpose. To you, who may be in the middle of your own collapse, hear this. Your story is not finished. You may feel shattered now, but each small act of courage is proof that the pieces can come together again, not as they were, but as something even stronger. And if these words have reached you, if they've reminded you even for a moment that you still have the power to rise, then walk with us. Subscribe to this channel, not for numbers or vanity, but because here, we rise together. Here we remember that even when everything falls apart, we are never beyond repair. Because falling is not the end. It's the way we learn to stand.